Boy, that Elon Musk is creative, isn't he? Everything you throw at him, it turns it to gold. Have you seen the new Hershey's Edition Tesla? At the first sign your vehicle's on fire, it fires out a capsule with enough inside of it for s'mores for 2 people. And for $9,000 more, he'll include 2 cans of all-beef Vienna sausage for a weenie roast. Welcome to Grounded, the place to hear the salty truth. I'm your host, Scott Cates, coming to you live from the Northeast Georgia mountains and the tiny town of Tiger, where today the rain's just getting over. But don't put your snow shovels away. I know spring is on the horizon here. Mother Nature cannot figure out what she wants to be on certain days of the week. That's just the way it is right here in the Northeast Georgia mountains. But don't put your snow shovels away just yet, because I think the pollen forecast this week is like 3 to 4 inches, I'm guessing. So, wow, it's going to get yellow out there pretty quick, already starting in that process, which means if the car washes in your local town will probably be busy. And the cleanup that will come over the next 4 to 6 weeks, trying to clean up the pollen, will be an interesting feat. Boy, a lot of things in the pending pile today. Whose idea? The whole idea of, hey, let's go and let's burn up Teslas. Let's just go and, catch on fire the charging stations. And let's go, protest. We're protesting Elon Musk. Let's go protest all of this. This whole idea. Is it any wonder that Trump actually got elected? Really? I mean, when we look at ideas like this, whose harebrained idea was this? Honestly, first of all, to light a Tesla on fire is probably not the greatest concept in the world. Any electric car, if you've ever watched lithium batteries burn, goodness gracious, now that is a sight to behold right there. They glow real bright. You don't want to be anywhere near that car when it's on fire. You really don't. Lithium battery. It takes a while to put one out. The more water you throw at it, the brighter it burns, that sort of thing. So the idea of, I don't know who came up with this idea, somebody at home. And then all of a sudden now the idea that we're going to throw Molotov cocktails at Teslas. Now this was not, I saw the article of the guy that literally was trying to figure out how to make this work. And maybe he watched the wrong TikTok video. I'm not sure. YouTube video. I'm not sure on how. Whatever he was watching that was trying to educate him on how to make one of these, I guess. He either got the mixture wrong or he just didn't pay attention that you're not supposed to get gas on your body. I'm not real sure because I'm not real educated in that area either. But in the process of him trying to get his Molotov cocktail lit, he burst into flames. And so we're not dealing with really, I think, on the level of much intelligence here anyway, when we're talking about this. But you could see the Justice Department has said at this point, this will stop. It needs to stop. They're talking about the rhetoric stopping. It's amazing about how a year ago things were flipped around the other direction, people trying to get the rhetoric to stop from the other side. And at this point, the call, and it doesn't matter how you look at it, you could say, well, we're not citing violence here. Of course you are. If you can look at some of the late night talk shows and actually some of the media, we're not trying to incite violence here. Of course you are. And that's the one thing that you've got to understand, is that whenever violence, who benefits from the fact that violence is going to take place on either side? Well, of course the media does, which means the advertising that is going to come in during that hour that you're watching that media, whatever it is, whether it's a late night talk show or whether or not it is going to be a news outlet, whatever, whoever's paying for the advertising is getting more exposure. That's what costs the advertising more, and they're making more money in the process. It's all about that. So of course they are. No matter what they say, oh no, we're wanting this to be a peaceful protest. Sure. Anyone really believe that? I don't think so. I really don't. Because after all, to be honest with you, aren't politicians just the most truthful people on the planet? We'll talk about that in a few minutes. We'll get into that in just a few minutes. Because I'm not sure that politicians actually go running for office. We'll talk about, this is a part of the podcast today. We'll actually talk about this in a few minutes on what do we actually have happening. What happens with politicians anyway, but there are other things that I've got in my pending pile I want to get to actually first before I go back to that. I saw this headline, which says illiterate high school graduates are suing school districts as Ivy League professors warn of a deeper problem. And so when you get into this article, one of the things that you actually see is that students that are graduating from high school, and we talked a little bit about this in the podcast on the decline, the rapid decline of maturity. But students that are graduating from high school now, and you'll see some of these that have lawsuits against these places are because of the fact that they graduated with extremely high GPAs and do not know how to read or write. And so they're suing because they didn't get the education. And not only did they not get the education, but at the same time, they were given the grades or are fooled into thinking that they were doing just fine by being given high grades for that which they never learned. Well, that's not good at all. It just isn't. And by the way, has this taken anybody by surprise that this is actually happening? I don't think so. I think we've been hearing about this. I've talked a little bit about education before, but we've been hearing about this for quite some time. It's been going on for a long time, but finally right now, it's like people feel like they have the ability to speak up, especially with Trump trying to erase or get rid of the Department of Education at this point. It's amazing. Look at how busy Trump actually is. He appears busy. And if you saw, he's come out against looking at criticizing the Biden administration for how many times they use the auto pen to sign legislation, and that some of it did he even know about? That's been the question that's been coming over the last few weeks. And why is that? And the people on Donald Trump's staff says that 98% of the legislation that is signed, he signs personally. When it comes across his desk, he looks at it. He actually puts a signature on it. So he actually works at it, and he believes that accountability to the American people. Now, we'll go on and talk a little bit about that again in a few minutes as we are looking at, again, the pending pile today, just looking at a few things that are in that. But there is a deep problem, and there's a deep problem of illiteracy from students who are graduating out from high school that don't know the basics. We talked about this last week, even down at the levels of elementary school, them leaving elementary school, not knowing the basic principles of mathematics, reading, writing, language, any of it at this point. And so the basics, and to be honest with you, looking at just the basics on what it takes, the basic foundation on what it takes to actually learn, we are severely behind on in many areas in the nation. And that's coming to light. There are a number of things that are actually coming to light. So these lawsuits have come up recently about this. And to be honest with you, something has to be done. So these people are standing up and saying, look, the voice needs to be heard that this is actually happening. And now the media is getting a hold of these cases and seeing that this is taking place. And suddenly, all of the things, it's amazing to me, all of the things that people have been crying out about, but been accused of, oh, that's conspiracy theory, or they've been accused of, oh, you're just talking off the top of your head, are now coming to light and becoming true. And so the last podcast about the central core of freedom being truth, and truth brings about trust, which brings about freedom. Yes, that's exactly the way that it works. Truth brings trust, and trust brings freedom. So when it comes to the government, one of the things that Mr. Trump is trying to do is expose some things so the American people can actually see truth, so we can get some things out in the open, be transparent on the majority of the things that are happening, so some trust can be brought back and freedom to be brought back to the nation by going back to truth. It's interesting as we see all of these things taking place. Interesting is my favorite word, especially if you listen to last week's podcast. Boy, I had a tough time last week trying to get that thing out. And I kept the one word that came to my mind, interesting. And the reason why that word interesting came to my mind is I didn't want to be super cynical and critical. And I was going to be. And I could feel it coming. I thought, man, goodness gracious, how many times people have been accused of so many things. And now it ends up becoming, and you see that it's actually true. Boy, the cynicism comes. So with the humor sometimes comes the cynicism. And I have a good friend. My good friend Ron, sometimes he said, boy, got cynical lately, haven't you? And I'm trying not to be that. I try not to be that. I really do fight in that. But sometimes when I get tired, I get to the cynical side. Just being honest. Quick confession for all of you today. So, in illiteracy that we see going on, obviously, if a guy can't figure out how to put together the things he's throwing at the Tesla and he bursts himself into flames, we can obviously see we have issues with illiteracy here. I'm just saying. What else do I have in the pending pile today? Well, let's just go totally off the cuff for just a second. And Tom Cruise's new movie. Let's talk about that for a minute. I do want to kind of go to that for just a second because I have really enjoyed. I don't know about you, but I really like the Mission Impossible series. I think they're great. I like the last few things Mr. Cruise has done. I've liked Tom Cruise through the years, even though Tom Cruise is actually Tom Cruise in every movie, pretty much. He's the same guy. And they build these action hero films around that. Now, I'm not a typical action hero. It's not like I like them all. It's not like that's the case. But I do like a really good thriller that has a good twist at the end. And it seems like the Mission Impossible films do that. And they keep you riding on the edge of your seat. And you always go back. And the one thing that you're going to see in the Tom Cruise films is you're going to see Tom Cruise running. And if you've seen the actual trailer for the new Final Reckoning, the Mission Impossible Final Reckoning, you're going to see Tom Cruise running once again. And so in every film, it seems like he's running, and he runs endlessly. And so this guy's got to be the hardest working man in Hollywood. No doubt. He is busy working. He's working, keeping himself fit, in shape. But the new film is going to be number 4 right now. Even before it's released, the current production cost at this point is just over $400 million, making it the 4th most expensive film at this point ever filmed. The most expensive a film has ever had, up to most expensive film, the number 4 most expensive film ever to be put out there, being made at $400 million and climbing a little bit because they're not done yet. They're not really here at the release date yet. So they put it all together, and it's running just a tick over $400 million. So they're expecting that Mr. Cruise is going to have a big summer, I think, starting at the end of May, whenever this thing comes out. And to be honest with you, I'm looking forward to it. It's filmed in IMAX. And the last few Mission Impossible films I went to go see in IMAX. And man, y'all, it was worth it. It was just great. You're on the edge of your seat. You hold your breath. You want to eat your popcorn before the movie starts. Just saying. But it's a great experience. And I do love those films. And, when it comes to films, I just like good. I like good films where the hero wins, that kind of thing. I'm a typical guy that likes that kind of film. Now, I've got people that I do prefer. Cruise has said, even though it says The Final Reckoning, he's basically come out and said, and the franchise has come out and said this probably will not be the last. And Cruise, they interviewed him a few days back, and he said, Now, I'll probably be signed on for a few more. And he said, if Harrison Ford can play Indiana Jones into his 70s, surely I can do the same thing with the role of Ethan Hunt. And who knows? Maybe so. Anyway, that thing's coming out. Looking forward to it. And, and like I said, it's not all about action films. It isn't. There are other films that I really like as well, as long as they've got a really great theme and a great storyline. And it doesn't really matter to me. I look back, and many of you, I've had a conversation about these things with. I look back. I like black and white films. I love them. Matter of fact, one of my favorite films is a film called Five Graves to Cairo, filmed in about 1941. It's a Billy Wilder film. And for those of you that think you're going to look it up and view it online, I'm not sure you can even find it online. You're going to have to go and maybe go to somewhere like Amazon and look it up and get it on a DVD if you're going to watch it. But I love the film. I can't really tell you why. It's based in the desert. And it's sort of a British spy type film, filmed in that era. But I love the cinematography. I love the theme of it. I love the film. It's great. It's a great film. And I love Bogart. I really do. I look back and I look at Bogart because I love his crafty little one-liners that are just great films. Of course, the film of all time, the one-liner of all time is in Casablanca when the Nazi officer asks him, he says, "What nationality are you?" And he says, "I'm a drunkard." Just equips off these one-liners in films like The Maltese Falcon and Casablanca. But on the heels of Five Graves to Cairo, he did a film called Sahara, which is also a great film, just like Bogart in those films, just because he's so crafty with those one-liners and he's just Bogart. But there are many black and white films like that I like. I like film noir, like thriller film noir films like that, which are black and white, filmed really dark. And they were careful about the cinematography of those days. And as you move forward, I do like I like a number of films. There was a film a few years back called The Artist that was filmed. It was a modern day silent film filmed in black and white about the plights of a man and a woman who met, and he is coming out of the silent film era, moving into the sound era. He doesn't want to do that, and he holds on to that silent film era. She got her start in silent films with him, and she moves into the sound era and becomes a big star, and he declines in his stardom, and they cross paths. As they cross paths, it's an interesting film. The Artist, one of my favorites, really a great film, but it has a fantastic storyline. That's what I do like. Now, I did the other night actually sit down and watch The Notebook with my spouse. I did do that. And to be honest, that film is an interesting film. It's heart gripping. It is, and I know some of you are like, "You did what?" Yes, I did. Yes, I checked the man card at the door before I did. I did, but I watched The Notebook with my wife. It was the first time she had ever seen it, and I told her when the film was over. I said, "One of the most powerful scenes of this is they're in an argument and they're fighting, and while they're in this argument and they're fighting, he looks up at her. He's written her 365 days, written something about her in a letter for 365 days out of the year. By the way, that would tell you he loves her while he's off at war. Of course, she never receives the letters. And that's an interesting part of the film. But the other part of the film that's really great is they're in an argument when she's trying to decide on whether or not she wants to stay with him. She's like, "Here we are fighting again." And he says, "Yes." He said, "There are times I hurt your feelings and there are times you hurt mine. But in that," basically he says, "in that's where we grow." And in the end, they end up getting old together. And you find out that he's actually reading a story out of a notebook to her. And you discover that even though he was the first one to write 365 things about her in these letters and send those to her, she ends up writing to him at the end and says, "If I ever lose my mind, basically, read this to me and I'll come back to you." And it's precious. It's a great film. Everything goes kind of way out and comes back in at the end and all comes together. It's a great film. So all films, doesn't matter. I do like. I like it as long as they're creative and well done. I like science fiction. I like. I'm not a big jump scare guy. That's not something I just don't. I don't like surprises anyway. So I don't do big jump scares anyway. But the thrillers on the edge of your seat, they're great. I do like the Mission Impossible. I like Daniel Craig as James Bond. I know that many people did not. So at the beginning, they didn't think that he would ever make it as James Bond. He's kind of a Steve McQueen version of James Bond, really, is what he ends up being. And those films that he acted in for that, he did very, very well, I thought. So there you go. There's my take on movie critic, aisle today, if you will, the pending pile. Going to Cruise's $400 million Mission Impossible installment here. About to come out. And it looks action-packed. We'll see. And it should actually. It'll probably gross $1 billion before it's over. Most likely. It's just become more popular and more popular. And no matter what you think about Cruise, the films are entertaining. He's the hardest working man. I promise you, he is. I got to be the hardest working man in Hollywood. The man would never have to act another moment and still just sit back and rake in the royalties and be fine. But he's so busy all the time. Busy filming another, busy at the craft, busy working another stunt, busy all of those things. And I look at Trump. Trump is like that. They say Trump doesn't sleep at about 4 or 5 hours a night. Neither did Elvis Presley, so who was very busy also as well. But they said Trump doesn't sleep at about 4 or 5 hours a night because he's busy and he's working at this point in time. He's not letting any dust settle under his feet while he's there. He knows he's temporary and got some time and doesn't have but a little bit of time, which is different than your average politician. Because oftentimes your average politician runs for office and they get in. And once they get there, it's like they're busy they make campaign promises. And they do. And they know on their campaign promises that these things are essential. They need to be done. These things need to be changed. These things are essential and they need to be done. But it's almost like when a politician gets into office, what happens is that the work is just too hard. And so they bow out of sticking with the plan. And when they do, they move to what you might call the non-essentials, which is not really a great move, but it is characteristic of really a generation that's alive today. And what ends up happening is that everyone gets bogged down with the non-essentials, and they look busy, if you will, in the non-essentials, or they get busy at the non-essentials, but they never truly get the essentials that they need to accomplish. And to be honest with you, I think that's costing relationships it often. And I see this happening, and we see this decline in relationships, from friendships to romantic relationships to marriages and what ends up happening is that people get busy at that which is not essential. Now, don't get me wrong. Some people think they just can't live without me at work. But if you get to the core of that, oftentimes the busyness of the non-essentials keeps their mind occupied. And as it keeps their mind occupied, it keeps them from having to deal with the essentials of life. And so this is very popular. It's actually something that is extremely popular. And so a politician oftentimes can make an entire career of looking and focusing on the non-essentials or promising the essentials, but never getting around to it and being busy at the non-essentials and essentially never getting anything done, which is why sometimes, not just in relationships, things fall apart. Friendships fall apart because people are busy at like non-essentials and not necessarily coming back and taking care of the things that are essential to hold together a relationship. Oftentimes in a marriage, the same thing. Husband or wife, doesn't matter, looks up and says, man, they just can't live without me at work. when the reality of the fact oftentimes truly is this, that they really could. And you don't usually find that out until you lose the job and they just replace you with someone. And even if it takes 3 people, you can be replaced. But you've got to make the choice and the decision on whether or not where you're going to be and who you're going to be and what is the priority. That's it. Dealing with the priority. What is the essential priority of your life? Are you going to be husband, wife, father, mother, or are you going to be the busy executive? And if you say I can be both, but you might be, but I'm not sure you can do both well at the same time. Some people can pull that off, maybe. Don't get me wrong. Somewhere when life gets so busy, something is left undone, and oftentimes multiple things are. So paying attention to the essentials is important, the priority, and prioritizing your life. Because if you don't sit down and say, I'm really needed here, time will progress and you'll end up with nothing. I'll talk about that. Let's just talk about that for just a second. And I want to cover this, really. I really want to talk about this today, coming out of Proverbs 24:27 for just a second. And I'm going to jump over a few verses and move to something else here in a minute. But it says, prepare your outside work, make it fit for yourself in the field, and afterward build your house. Now, there are 2 parts to this that are really interesting. And the bottom line is one of the things it's saying is take care of the things that are important first. Then take care of the non-essentials. This is important that I think we should figure out in priority, because sometimes we just sort of go at life like, what is the most important thing? And oftentimes when people feel like they're so important in the job that they're in, that they can't lose the job they're in, or they can't lose the people that work for them, that they step up at sometimes and they go, it's okay if I lose my family in the process, or I lose my life in the process. It ought not to be that way, but it ends up, because it's sort of a trick. In relationships, it's interesting because you want to feel needed, I think. Everyone does. Man kind of wants to be the hero, and he can find that being a hero oftentimes in his work. She can do the same, find her importance in her work. There's no doubt. And when it comes home, it's like the mundane of life. Oftentimes, well, I do this every day. We have to clean, we have to cook, we have to do these things, we have to, or go out to eat or whatever. We've got to do all of these things. And the answer oftentimes to what you might consider the mundane is say, let's just entertain him. Let's entertain him to death. Let's run him here and run him there and run him here and sit him down and play games with him here and just entertain him to death. That way we don't actually have to sit down and actually have any conversation about life, or leave much of a legacy at all in their life at all. And you might say, well, while we're playing games, we talk. But I mean actually sitting down and having the conversations that need to be had in order to grow your family, your children, your friendships, those things that matter. Don't get me wrong, work is essential. Matter of fact, Ecclesiastes says, Solomon says in Ecclesiastes that for a man to work hard is a good thing, and for him to enjoy the fruit of his labors. That's in good. Matter of fact, really nothing more. It's rewarding to them than this. There's no doubt. And so as a result of that, what you see is that both men and women are pushing hard in areas where they're working hard at things. My question is, and this is where I get down to it, what relationships truly do matter? I'm just thinking out loud here at this point. Take care of the things that are important first. Make sure your priorities are in order the way that not only you would have them set in order, but the way God has established that you would. Whatever you do, the important relationships that are in your life, do not let them take the back burner to something that will be temporary and absolutely fleeting and go away, because you will look up at some point in time and see that the years have gone away and you've missed the essentials altogether. Man, I tell you, I see this happen so often. People look up and they say, really, I see it, but the time with my kids is quickly fading away. I've got to go and spend the time I really want to spend, but they get so busy in the non-essentials of life and busy, and that busyness of life that they look up and blink their eyes and their kids are gone. And at that moment, a lot of times what happens when emptiness does actually set in is the regret of the fact that the time was not spent. It's almost like what I see on a deathbed in some ways. Just go with me here on this. When I go and talk to a man on his deathbed and he says, I was busy, these were my successes in life as far as his work was concerned, but really that doesn't even matter anymore at this point. And they all go back and they say these things. I wish I would have spent more time with my wife, or I wish I would have spent more time with my children, or I wish I would have spent more time with my family and my grandkids. So I guess what I'm saying is learn to prioritize that early. And don't let the busyness of your life absolutely take over. Now, don't get me wrong. There are important things to be done. I look up, and I see men who are achieving a number of things. Like right now, we see that, you've got like Trump in office, who's a busy man. Musk, who's busy at all of these things too as well. But you can also look at family life there on both sides and say, man, that's not been, even though they have a family that surrounds them, it's been tough on their families to be that busy. Just saying. Then there's the verse that's at the end of Proverbs 24. And it's written, it says this, I went by the field of the lazy man and by the vineyard of the man devoid of understanding. And there it was. He's saying this. There was this vineyard. It was all overgrown with thorns, and its surface was covered with nettles. Its stone walls were broken down, and when I saw it, I considered it well. I looked on it, and I received instruction. He basically said, I looked on it, and I received this instruction to my heart, which is this, a little sleep, a little slumber, and a little folding of the hands to rest, and so shall your poverty come like a prowler, and your need like an armed man. See, with the lazy man, this is what happens. And with a man who doesn't prioritize the things that are important, this is the key. Now, listen to what I have to say. This is why I'm telling you today, set your priorities in what they are. Go ahead and set those priorities. It is important. Make sure you understand, according to your heart and according to God, what the essentials truly are in your life. Because every person can become lazy in any area of their life. It's true. You can become lazy. You can be so busy at work, you become lazy at your relationships at home. Or you can be so busy in your relationships, or not even that. You can become lazy at work and lose your job and have no, you understand what I'm saying. There'd be no production there either. What I'm telling you is this. Figure out your essentials and be busy at those. And I know some of you are going to look up and say, well, what if my essential is work? It might be. Right at this second is what you see. I have a requirement to do these things. I understand. But if you have a family, or you have relationships that are important to you, I promise, if you do not nurture those, when they're gone, you'll wish you had. And at the end of the time, when you think you were accomplishing so much in the production of whatever it was that you were doing, if you missed those things, they have regrets. Here's the thing. With the lazy man, truly, everything falls apart. There are 4 key things I think that are here. The 4 F's, if you want to call them that. The first one is faith. When a man is lazy in his faith falls apart. When a man is lazy at actually in his relationship with Jesus Christ, his faith begins to fall apart. When a man is lazy at picking up the word and reading it, when a man is lazy at that, when he puts that as last place and does not make that a priority in his life, that's the first thing that begins to fall apart is faith. And by the way, that's the most important thing. It truly is. And so it's important for men and women to understand that the first thing that we got to do is trust God with our lives and put that relationship with Christ in an important place as an essential priority. And when you do that, it helps to put everything else in line. With a lazy man, when he's lazy with his family, his family falls apart. His relationships aren't built. And they don't just fall apart today, they fall apart for the future. And the legacy oftentimes that is handed down, and this is a shame, but it's true, because they're not taught what family should be about. They don't know how, when they get into a family, to pursue family and keep one together in the future. We'll talk about that in a second, too. With a lazy man, everything falls apart. Faith is first. Family. If you're lazy in your family, it will fall apart. And any fortune that you might have or be making as well. If you're lazy at your job, like we talked about, then there'll be no what you want to call fortune. And what I mean by that will be even enough to even stay alive and take care. I've had a gentleman, a good close friend of mine, said, men are happiest when they're achieving in their life and in their checking account, they have exactly what they need in $5 more. And just $5 more. And it's true. So with a lazy man, everything falls apart. Faith, family, fortune, and finally, future. Because there's no foundation built for the future. The truth is, when these things fall apart, faith, family, fortune, future, the problem is that there's no wisdom or understanding to be found anywhere there. Because they were busy at the non-essentials instead of being busy at the essentials. Faith, family, fortune, future. If you're lazy in those areas, none of it will be had. None of it will be had. And none of it will be kept. And that's important, I think, to understand. There's a reason why Donald Trump, let's say, is busy right now. He's investing in the nation because he's investing in the future. He wants to invest in the future and make sure that the legacy that is left is actually a legacy of a foundation of a future that is built. He wants to do that. We see that. He sees that as a priority because everything is left behind. And that's because many of the non-essentials have been focused on for a long time. And we've let the essentials go. And that's the condition of so many things, I think, within the nation. We've let the essentials go. Even in our own personal lives, we've let the essentials go. The essentials of faith, we've seen that let go for a long time. The essentials of family, we've seen that let go. And I hear people say, well, I take care of my family. I make a good living, and that's great, but they need you. And I've had other people say, well, don't lay that on me. Yeah, seriously, they do need you. Because at the end of the day, and at the end of of your life, the true treasure that you have are the people that have been in it. There really isn't anything else. So that is important. Coming to the priorities and discovering what are the essentials, sometimes that's extremely hard to do. Because if you base it on your emotion, you base it on how you feel in the moment, oftentimes you feel like work can't live without me, or you feel like other areas that may be non-essentials that you can't even see because you're blinded by the fact that you're so busy in these areas. I encourage you to get off the merry-go-round for a second and just establish the priorities and get busy at the essentials, the things that are important. And let the things that you're feeding into with the essentials, like your faith and your family that you feed into, let that feed into the fortune and the future. And I promise you, you will have a great foundation that's established for not just you and what's ahead, but also for your family and your friends and the people that you really love and care about. So, there you go. What does all this mean? Well, basically, when it comes down to it, what are we busy at, I think? Are we busy at the essentials? Maybe you needed to hear this today. I know when I was looking into it, I looked and said, wait a minute, where have I been, really? What are the essentials in my life? What am I focusing on that truly are the essentials? Where is my investment? And there's not a single one of us that doesn't want. Every one of us wants our investment, wherever we're placing our time and our resources. We want it to count. And we want it to count in the lives of the people that we care the most about. Been listening to Grounded, the place to hear the salty truth. What's all this mean? Well, first of all, I think it's important. If you get faith in order, that's a great thing. Coming to know Jesus Christ as Savior, if you do not know Christ as Savior, is important. In order to do that, you must come before Jesus and say, look, I need my sins forgiven so that I can walk with you, so that I can receive that instruction from you, so that I can receive the power of the Spirit of God that will guide me in truth. Lord, I just need you. So come into my life, save me from my sins, take those out of the way, and lead me today. You can do that at any point in time. Just stop and cry out to Jesus and say, look, here's my life. Take it, all of it. Remove my sin from me. Forgive me of all of it, and help me to walk in you. That's the first thing. Number two, in this, what I can tell you is this. Sit down for just a second and write a priority list. What is important to you? And I don't mean for just the moment. I'm saying if you're so busy you can't take a breath to sit down, and you're going to sit down, and in the moment you're breathing hard and you're going to sit down and write a list, take a second, maybe this evening, maybe take a few minutes. Stop, sit down, and be quiet. Maybe say a prayer and say, Lord, help me to establish what are my priorities? What are my essentials? Write out that list. Just write 5 things that are essential to you in your life. Write out your people, write out family, write out whatever it is that is essential to you in your life. And then really look at that list and establish, is that essential because it's essential right now in the moment because that's what you're busy at? Or is that something that needs to be put into the non-essential category so that you can get back to the things that are essential? Because some of you may have already done this. I don't know. But some of you may just need to do that today. What is the priority here? What are the essentials? Help me to take care of those. And then we'll get to the non-essentials. Well, I appreciate you listening to the podcast today. Hopefully it spoke to your heart. Looking forward to seeing you next Monday. Y'all have a great week.